What am I doing?
Morning, everybody. Turn the button off so that.
There was a little light on this screen that shows it comes up red when he's speaking, and then.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yes, I think
Free
we're
to
on.
speak.
I think we're on. Okay. So to move on with the agenda. Welcome and apology. Any apologies, Mike?
Yep. Alistair Harvey, Charlotte Leach, and Craig Best is unable to join us this morning. Sue's going to be a bit late. She's having some technological issues, but she'll be joining us in a bit. I think that's it.
Minutes of the last meeting in December, which I wasn't at, so this is a bit of a magical mystery tour for me. So apologies if I miss anything or get anything wrong. So just to go through the minutes from the beginning, matters that had arisen from the previous meeting, the transport symposium that was held did that go ahead? And I don't know if Andrew, if there's anything you want to feed back to the group from that.
Only that it went ahead. It was successful. It was a much smaller event than we'd originally envisaged, which is why it was invite only. And it was just a kind of high-level strategic kind of pull around of some of the really thorny issues. I'm hoping that flowing out of that, especially through our management plan, will be more specific actions and consultation, which may well come back to this forum.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. I think, yes, sustainable transport is clearly going to continue to be an issue that, well, we're going to return to and that the National Park's going to need to continue to deal with. So, yeah, it'd be great to be kept up to speed on that. We had the main presentation last time from Simon Geller at Sustrans, which I was really sorry to have missed. I know there were a couple of things he was going to follow up with perhaps the National Trust and with Chatsworth, but Craig and Charlotte aren't here. I don't know if I suppose no one else has got any. No.
Sorry, Louise. I have seen some correspondence relating to the one of the routes that he talked about, which was the route that goes down from Spies View down to, well, just below Spies View down to Grindleford Cafe and Railway Station. I think there are some ongoing discussions, but it all hinges on the Residents Association, I think. So ongoing, but not terribly happening really.
Thank you. Sorry? Okay, thanks for that. So the next item was Ben's access to water presentation, which I was also very sorry to have missed. I had lots of good feedback. I wondered, so there's, I know that since then, Ben, you've been carrying on discussions around the Paddlers Code and various other things with government. And Charlotte, I think, as well, got some updates on agricultural, the agriculture bill and kind of impacts on that access. So I've asked both of them if they'll give us an update basically now on that, if that's okay.
So basically, I'm just dealing with the structure of the announcement that was made in January. So the government has a manifesto commitment to maintain the farming budget. So all reductions in the current basic payment scheme will be reinvested into farming. The basic payment scheme is being phased out and it will finish in 2027. The sustainable farming incentive aims to be more streamlined, efficient and fairer. The government intends to implement similar improvements across countryside stewardship next year. The government published an update of their environment land management schemes with the aim of bringing clarity and certainty for business planning. The schemes will help to bring profitability and resilience for farmers as they produce the high quality food for which they are known, while at the same time protecting and enhancing nature. Sustainable farming incentives have 9 standards. All farmers currently in receipt of the basic payment scheme are eligible to apply. There are 2 levels for each standard, introductory and intermediate. The agreements will last for 3 years. Application is open so farmers can apply at a time to suit them, and it is designed to be quicker and more straightforward. Countryside stewardship provides financial incentives for farmers, foresters and land managers. Higher tier grants are for multi-year management options and capital items for the most environmentally important sites, which include commons and woodland. These are usually in place that need complex management, such as creating or restoring habitats and improving woodlands. Mid-tier and wildlife offers are aimed at protecting and enhancing the natural environment through multi-year management grants and capital grants to improve diversity of wildlife, water quality, air quality and natural flood management. The government are developing an enhanced vision of countryside stewardship for future years to achieve the same ambitious outcomes intended for delivery through local nature recovery rather than build a whole new scheme. England Woodland Creation offer is to support landowners, land managers and public bodies to create new woodland, including through natural colonisation on areas as small as 1 hectare. This is part of a suite of Forestry Commission initiatives to support woodland creation and tree planting across England. There is also help to support the design of new woodland under the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. There are also one-off grants to support productivity, slurry infrastructure grants to provide farmers with an upgrade of their slurry management systems, offering strong environmental benefits, farming resilience advice, free business advice to any farmer or land manager in receipt of basic payment scheme. Farming in protected landscapes provides funding to support and improve areas of outstanding natural beauty, national parks and the Broads. Tree Health Pilot provides funding for those who manage certain trees and or woodlands affected by some pests and diseases. In some regions of England, farming innovation programmes provides funding to develop and use innovative methods and technologies. Farming Investment Fund provides grants to improve productivity and bring environmental benefit. Landscape Recovery Scheme supports ambitious large-scale nature recovery projects focusing on net zero protected sites and habitat creation. This could include projects creating and enhancing woodlands, peatlands, nature reserves and protected sites such as ancient woodlands, wetlands and salt marshes. Whether this delivers on all the desired outcomes will depend on the uptake from farmers. So far, there is a very mixed view from the farming community. Many farmers voted for Brexit to reduce bureaucracy and to leave them free to do what they do best, which is farm. Some farmers will be put off before they start, and I think you can all agree that what I have just read to you is incredibly wordy, and we haven't even approached the 130 different schemes that you can apply for. Some farmers will be put off before they start and will abandon the system and increase livestock numbers, which will be the opposite of what the government intends. There appears to be money in the system, but it has to be applied for, and I worry that there will be a poor uptake. The average age of a farmer is in their 60s, and if you think how farming has changed in the last 40 years, you can understand their fatigue. There is little in the detail to increase access, but this is the base layer, and the more options may come as the higher tiers are rolled out between now and 2027. There are many barriers to increasing access provision, some perceived and some real. We're a small island with a large population, and we ask a lot of our countryside. Ben.
Crikey. Okay, so how do I follow that? So I think I like the bit you talked about farmers feeling fatigue. I don't know about farmers feeling fatigue, but we as a sector certainly feel fatigue on Elms. We've been trying to work on this now since pre-Agriculture Act came in, got royal assent. So we've been ourselves, the Ramblers, BMC, OSS, Horse Society have all been working to try and influence Elm for almost 4 years now, if not 5. To ensure the access element is as strong as it can be and delivers on what the Act says. And to date, we still haven't had the assurances that the Act, the Elm scheme will deliver for access. Having said that, after meeting Minister Prentice and Lord Benyon January last year, calling for a chance to do consultation properly with stakeholders. A year later, we finally got that opportunity to talk to DEFRA. They finally opened up the floor to access organisations, and 2 weeks ago we had an Elm stakeholder forum, which was lovely. I wish they would have just read the briefing that we wrote them 2 years ago, because we simply covered quite a lot that was in that. There was a number of pre-set questions and discussion groups. I'm not going to go into the full detail of everything that was discussed, but I think the big takeaways from it were twofold, really. DEFRA are talking about exploring what they can pay through Elm to landowners for permissive access. It's about permissive access, not permanent access. And there was very, very strong pushback from every organisation who represents an access interest around the stakeholder call, that if we're using taxpayer money, then the priority should be for permanent access, because it's sustainable. There's lots of evidence to show that where permissive access has been paid for in the past, it's disappeared. There's something like 40,000 kilometres that have disappeared since, I can't remember the stat, I won't carry on that one. So we pushed very hard, and the pushback from DEFRA was, it's a ministerial decision that it will be permissive, and you need to influence the ministers to take that decision to make it permanent. So there's work for the sector to do to try and encourage, but it's unlikely that there will be permanent access. As it stands, there is no provision for permanent access. We talked about what things might be paid for, and it's continuing to be frustrating and tiresome that the emphasis is on educational access, farm visits, great as they are, brilliant as they are for young people and schools and adults, but access. The Agriculture Act did not just say educational access. It talked about enabling people to access the countryside. I can't even remember the exact wording. It did not stipulate educational access, full stop. And it's really frustrating that there's a big, strong emphasis on that farm visit type activity. So it was great that we had the opportunity to have that stakeholder forum. I think a lot of the decisions around Elm and access have been taken at ministerial level. I don't think there'll be huge amounts of change in those decisions, certainly not in the remaining time of this government. But we will continue to push and harry and harangue the government to try and get what we can out of Elm. But fundamentally the pot is finite, so it will only ever pay for so much. So we have to be realistic in what we ask for, but we have to keep pressing. I've got 3 others, but Jez, I can see your finger twitching. Do you want to?
It was just to ask a question, really. Is there any sort of place where all these permissive accesses are recorded? Because if it is going to be permissive rather than permanent, and I agree that's a shame, especially in some cases, sort of the second best thing is to make sure it's very publicly permissive so people know about it, and in particular they know when it's taken away. I just wondered, is there any sort of system or anything that does that?
The very point we raised at the meeting was this point of actually, some permissive access is better than no access, but if the access is going to get taken away, then it creates more confusion. Although it's great having more access, if it's going to be taken away, then actually people don't know whether it's there this day or that day. So there's issues, and there is no, to my knowledge, central place where you can find permissive. It pops up, and certainly around water it creates more problems than it solves.
Permissive access that's been funded under FIPL, Sue showed us a website where that's there for the national park. But obviously that's, I don't know if Sue or Mike, you might know, is that the case for all national parks, or is that just something the Peak District chose to do?
It's something that the Peak District have chosen to do because
Right.
we've been very successful in getting permissive access in the FIPL. That's been one
Right.
of our key aims.
Yeah.
And we've worked closely with the FIPL team and landowners to deliver permissive access. Permissive access that enhances the existing permanent access that's there. So, for example, there's one at Eldon Hill which links in an area of access land with the public right of way network. We hope that that process will continue because FIPL, of course, is originally just for 3 years and has been extended for a further year. But we feel that at least with our introductory access that we've been able to committees how the access works in practice. So something that we hope will continue.
Thank you. Yeah, so it would be really good to see other places taking the same approach, I think.
It's a really good debate to have permanent versus permissive. Certainly we all had that debate within the access organisations, but the collective opinion was that actually if we push for permanent, that's probably the gold standard, the best option. But there is always room for permissive, seasonal car parks, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
If I may, can I just drop in a few, just based on the update, from following on from my presentation last time, it's been I had a new notebook actually, only just the other week, and it seems to be filling up quite fast. 3 meetings of note in the same week of meeting the stakeholder forum around Elms. I met the Shadow Secretary of State along with Access colleagues around the right to roam plans that Labour have got, so I'll mention that. The Access and Engagement with Nature Stakeholder Forum and the 15-minute access to green and blue space. You probably all saw that announcement. And then meeting with DCMS. So if I start with DCMS, okay, I appreciate it might seem tangential to some people in the room around DCMS, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and sport, the place part that sport plays in but I think what we need to recognise is for canoeing, for climbing, for horse riding, our home is DCMS as a government organisation. However, we bridge the gap into DEFRA because they facilitate a lot of stuff. DCMS are about to launch a new sports strategy, and we've been pushing very hard as a sector to ensure that outdoor recreation, outdoor sport, access to nature is reflected really strong. In the 2015, the last 10-year plan, we got about 2 pages. And there was some nice noises made in it, but it didn't actually change anything. There was lots of talk about cross-department working. Not really happened. So we've been pushing the department really hard, and I'm meeting the sports minister in 2 weeks. But mountaineering, the Ramblers, we're all trying to push really hard in the same direction to encourage the sport minister, the sport team, to reflect our interests, our priorities and organisation as a sector, greater freedom to enjoy nature, responsible use of nature and protection of the environment, to reflect in the sports strategy. So it's not just sport, it's not just tennis courts and golf courses and football pitches, it's rivers and mountains and moors are places where people enjoy sport. So that's that one. The exciting one, you'll all enjoy hearing, I hope, was that we had a roundtable meeting with Jim McMahon. Sorry, name escaped me. Jim McMahon, Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment. Labour have come out quite early and said that they have a policy of re-looking at the right to roam. A lot of noise around the Dartmoor, things that happen around Dartmoor, and that stimulated some news stories. Jim McMahon actually came out and said that Labour would re-look at the right to roam to include access to water. Obviously that's particularly pertinent to my particular interests. So we had a really interesting round table with Campaign for National Parks, National Trust, AOMBs, Ramblers, BMC, all around the table inputting in YHA. So a good discussion. I genuinely feel there is an intent there by Labour to follow through on this. There was lots of talk about Crow being unfinished business, that actually there's more to do in there. They have a legacy of delivering for access, and they want people to believe that they can continue to deliver for access to nature. So I'm buoyed by the fact that there is this prospect on the horizon without counting chickens too soon. And there will be further roundtables to include landowners and landowner interests, etc., to try and probe. I think what Labour are doing at the moment is they're probing and consulting and doing lots of these roundtables. So really positive, interesting discussion there that we might see fruition in the next few years. I don't know, I felt quite excited by it anyway. And the last one on the Thursday of that week, it was a mad week, we had the Access and Engagement with Nature Forum. We had, again, another big roundtable discussion about this 15 minutes to nature announcement that Teresa Coffey put out there. Everybody should be able to access green and blue space within 15 minutes. So it was an interesting discussion again, and I won't go into all the full gory details of it. And I think the takeaway for me was, or certainly the pushback that I gave was, lovely headline grabbing statement. Oh, what a lovely thing to have 15 minutes to nature, but rubbish if you can't do anything when you get there. It'd be lovely if I could, 15 minutes to a river or a canal, but if I can't go in it, on it, sit next to it, it's a pretty, hollow pledge. So a lot of the pushback from the access organisations was, to make that real, you've got to give people an opportunity to engage with that space when they get there, have a quality experience, and that environment be a quality environment. So it's not just about this soundbite of people being able to go to a local see green space or see a river. They've got to do something when they get there, and that's all about delivering for access, physical access infrastructure, quality of information, breaking down barriers for disabled people, etc., etc., etc. So some interesting discussions in the last few weeks. I mean, the summary I've written here, Elm will have some access component. I don't know whether it will go as far as we would like it to. There is a background noise around wider reform on the horizon. Don't count chickens just yet. We haven't got a change in government just yet, but that no doubt will stimulate the Conservatives into coming up with some policies around this. So it's an interesting period of policy formation around manifestos coming out probably later this year. And then there is a kind of recognition now that actually there's not quite enough being done by the government, but actually it's unlikely they will do anything more in the next 12 months to 18 months before an election. So I think let's not get too hopeful in the next year, but there are some positives on the horizon, I believe. So I hope that was useful anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And does anyone have any comments or anything to add to that? Susan?
Thank you. I'm going back to Charlotte's sort of presentation, and I think you put it really succinctly. All these schemes for farmers and landowners to apply for, it's really complicated, absolutely excellent things to apply for, but how can they simply make a start, and how can we inform those landowners and farmers? Thank you.
I think it's a lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of it is the conversations that I had at Bakewell Market. I think if we could encourage the farmers to take up the business resilience element where they would get some dedicated help with it. I think it's just getting your key players to put their toe in the water and see what happens, and that will then influence it. I think the thing that influences farmers most is word of mouth. You see, Countryfile brought it up when they went to Bakewell Market, that the farmers will look at who's getting the best prices, and then they'll sidle up to them and say, what are you doing that's different from what I'm doing? And that's how it's passed on from one farmer to another. But I do think that there is a generational problem. I think the younger people will look at it and they will see the benefit of the schemes. I think older farmers will have come into farming when we had beef and butter mountains, and will have seen the subsidies go onto the land, and now they see the subsidies will be going into the pockets of the financial advisors that are coming up with green regeneration schemes. We can all trade our carbon, can trade on sustainability, but I think it's just seen that there will become a new sector that will cream the top off it, and it's always going to be the farmers who are expected to deliver this, but they're at the bottom of the pile when it comes to being the money. And personally, I don't see a problem in having a business that actually makes a profit, and I think farmers should aspire to that. Most farmers do it because they enjoy the lifestyle, which is a crazy thing to but I think also you should be able to make a living at it. DEFRA calculated that the average farming income from an upland farmer in the year 2022-23 was £16,300.
I think if I can just say though, Charlotte, my uncle, who's in his 80s, he retired from a farm at Wildclough, and he was one of the pioneering, green, with the green initiative. So, there are people at different ages. So it's just, where do they make a start? Just give me a place that, we can get out to people. Are the NFU promoting this?
I think so. I think the NFU are behind it. There is a lot in the farming press about it, but I think it's I think a lot of people worry about the complexity of it, and what I read to you was just the front page. that's not going into 130 options. So I think there's some hand-holding to be done, and I think that certainly the Farming Forum within the National Park will be working hard to bring that forward. The National Park's been proactive in testing a lot of the legislation and the way it's going to work. So I think the National Park has helped a lot, but it's just getting bodies on the ground to say, yeah, this is good, this is how you do it. Whether there will be road shows about it or not, I don't know, but that's something that maybe come forward later.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Charlotte. And I think that's a really interesting question about what's the role of organisations like the National Park and others in helping farmers navigate all of this from an access perspective as well, that there will be various different schemes and ways of doing that and making sure farmers are aware of those. I think, yeah, and that's really... I'm just going to go to Jill and then I'll come to you, Martin.
It was just to pick up on Jess's point about where do people find out about the permissive access. Under countryside stewardship and the higher level stewardship, DEFRA did have a website, and you could click on there, there'd be a map and some description and how long that access was available for. So presumably there'll be something similar under the new scheme, but it would be nice to push for some permanent access as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, yes. Sorry, Martin. Yep.
Just go back to access, and particularly on land. Ben was talking about it, just to welcome things on that, and certainly the couple of FIPL schemes I've seen in Big Park have been pretty good. But in my concerns is on access. What's the access for? Under the old stewardship scheme, sometimes you had a couple of fields where people just walk their dogs around in circles. So it obviously had some use, but looking more prosaic thing, what I'm looking for is the rights of way network, the number of dead-end rights of way network we've got, and also how do we get people, walkers, cyclists and horse riders off busy roads. And that was really my hope for the access. I have to say, looking at the document, the 197 pages, there's just, that is it on access. Just a quote from our chief executive, I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but he says, this is Ross Maloney, the level of provision for public access looks set to be frankly abysmal. So I'm really hoping that we're going to get more from that, but I think that prosaic thing, really, how are we going to get people out, how are we going to get people moving, how can we make people feel safe to get out, particularly a number of friends of mine who've taken up cycling in later years, they just say they will not use the roads.
Yeah.
And so it's, we've got so much work to do on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. I've got a question for Ben, which is in terms of, would there be any merit in the LAF, say, well, and assuming that everybody on the LAF agreed to this, say writing to government to say, I'm thinking particularly around funding for permanent rather than permissive access, because I suspect that as a LAF we have a position which is that we do see the benefits of permissive, but we would prefer permanent. Is that something that, I don't know?
Yes, it would be helpful, and that's what the bodies will be doing, people like British Horse Society, British Mountaineering, in our own ways. The more DEFRA officials obviously can't tell us to write to the minister, but they told us that it would be a ministerial decision, and we would have to make that representation to the minister. They couldn't. Yeah. So it was a veiled way of saying write to the minister, and the more letters fill them in the inbox, the better. So it wouldn't harm.
Others have a view on that? Charlotte's nodding. I think it's okay. I'll maybe talk to Mike and Charlotte and Ben, and we'll maybe put some words together and circulate and make sure everyone is happy with that. Jez.
Just to include in there about strengthening the permissive as well, via a national register or something.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ben and Charlotte. It's really good to have that depth of insight and update and keep us all kind of knowledgeable on this and with the changing legislation. So back to the minutes. I have timed it knowing that would be an in-depth session, so nobody panic about the fact we're still on the minutes. Just moving through the rest of the minutes. So item 6 last time was Sue's access update, which we'll come to under item 5. So I think most of what was talked about last time, Sue will be updating us on at that point. And And the same with Jill's ROIP update. Pretty much everything that's listed under there will come to when we get to item 6 today, which will be at Jill's section. And then the two final parts of the members' reports on the then. Okay, so the National Park Management Plan, I don't know if you've got anything else to update us on with that. I presume it was ratified in December? Yeah. And I asked Mike if he could find out an update about the car parking charges. So as far as my understanding is that it was agreed by the authority that they would accept the proposal, so there will parking charges will be increased and then introduced at the new sites through the park that have been proposed. What I'd asked Mike for was if he could find out an update on when that might be happening, but didn't have one at that point. Does anyone have any other updates or anything else, any other matters arising from the minutes? Great, thank you. So, moving on to our themed topic for this meeting. So we're very glad to have Dave, new member. We'd like to give you a baptism of fire. From Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, just to talk to us about nature recovery and about how that interacts with access, particularly obviously from the perspective of the Wildlife Trusts. As Dave said, do you want me to talk for 15 minutes or the rest of the day? So
it won't be the rest of the day, don't worry.
So yeah, Dave's going to talk and then we'll have time for Q&A. We had invited Craig from the National Trust also to join us, but there'd been a bit of a diaries mix-up and he's on holiday, and we tried to get him to be able to join by Teams, but the technology has failed us this time. But maybe in the future that's something that we would be able to do. And Craig has said he'd be really happy to come to another meeting and talk, so we'll get another chance to hear about that. And also if, yes, any other members want to talk on similar topics, then we can also kind of bring that in. But Dave, over to you. I've been recommended this microphone.
Okay.
There we go.
I like to jump around like a bit of an excited puppy at the front while I do so. I'll apologise in advance when I'm talking about my lifelong love, which is wildlife. So hopefully you can hear me okay without that, so I can jump around and go between my computer things. Then Mike asked me to do a presentation. I was slightly daunted in following Craig, and Craig's not here, so I feel slightly less daunted in following Craig, because you know, his bit of land is so huge, and you know, the National Trust can have such an impact and such an influence on this subject that it's kind of mind-blowing. So I'm Dave, and I'm a newbie. I came for the first time last time, and I work for Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. I'm not a local. I've only lived in Derbyshire since I was 6. So I'm not counted by most people as being local or from around here. Though I lived in Oakerthorpe and found my love for the local nature reserve, which had kind of frogs and toads and newts and things kind of swimming around everywhere, and it was amazing. There were literally thousands and thousands of them at spawning time in the spring, and I used to go down there with my mum, and we used to kind of look at them and catch them and play with them. And it literally, from that moment, I've just had a lifelong love for wildlife, and spent my life watching it and looking at it and getting on my hands and knees and driving my family mad, driving them all over the country, trying to find rare butterflies and plants and things like that. So that's kind of just me. And of course, I love the outdoors, and I've liked cycling since Stephen Roach ran the Tour de France in 1987. And you know, I love walking, and I did a bit of climbing, but I'm too small and could never reach. So I gave up on that. But I just love the outdoors, and I love everything to do with the outdoors. So Mike asked me to talk about a couple of the things that we're doing in the Peak District and kind of how that can link to access. So I'm going to give you a rundown on a couple of the most interesting things that we're doing and the kind of biggest profile stuff. One of them in particular is our Wild Peak programme. I'm going to talk through some statistics which you're going to have heard and things, so I'll kind of go, I'll go fairly quick. I'm Landscape Recovery Manager for the Dark and White Peak, and you know, when you tell somebody that's your title, everyone goes, whoa, what a brilliant job. That's amazing. And I will be honest, when we had a new team of landscape recovery managers and it was decided in the organisation who should have which region. And I've worked for the Wildlife Trust for 17 years. I've worked in quite a few different regions. And when they said, Dave, I think we want you to do the Peak District, I just thought, oh no, it's such a challenge, as you will all know, living here. And impacting wildlife and improving it for conservation is tough. You know, 87% of the land being used for agriculture, and fairly intensive agriculture as well. Britain, as David Attenborough, you'll have seen on his amazing programme on Sunday, pointing out that Britain is one of the most nature depleted parts of the world, countries in the world. And the Peak District is one of the most nature depleted parts of the most nature depleted country in the world. It's a massive, massive challenge to try and impact the landscape in the Peak District. So, you know, these are some of the problems that we have. The worst being Boris coming in. Was it 2019 he came? And he came to Muppet when we had all those big floods, and he came with his brush, and it was just a bit embarrassing. And yeah, he came, and you know, Roseley, the floods that we have in Roseley, these 10-year flood events. You look at the flood risk map; they're now annual. You know, they're not new. This is our farm landscape, and farming. Please don't misunderstand the Wildlife Trust relationship with farming and farmers. Incredibly important, both kind of, you know, domestically and financially, and providing food for us. But you know, when 70% of our land in the UK is used for agriculture, but we chuck away 40% of all of our food is wasted, and we don't pay enough for it. And I could go into this for an entire talk on this. You know, when supermarkets drove down food prices, and I mean, it's just all economically wrong. And how do we restore that landscape to something that's good for wildlife when we've got all of those problems? It's really, really tough. And as Charlotte was saying, the average income for a farmer, it's scandalous. You know, we're just not paying enough for what we eat. And anyway, so I could talk about that could be an entire talk. But yeah, you know, and you know, this is the White Peak, and this is the kind of challenge that we've got. You know, you take away all of those walls, and we just kind of got a green desert with not much in between. And when Lawton back in 2010 said we would need to bigger, better, more, and joined up for wildlife in our landscapes, this is the challenge that we have. How could we get that economic model right so that the custodians of this land and the farmers, you know, get a good deal and get the right deal out of this, as they should, but also improve things for wildlife as well. This is the kind of challenge that we've got. And yeah, these are the 10-year flood events. So we want to try and work out how we can use nature, ecosystem services to stop this happening. Wingy Church, South Wingfield Church. I used to go swimming in the weir behind there when I was kind of a teenager. And yeah, it's just amazing. These are common events now. So how can we use kind of ecosystem services to do that? So just very, very briefly touch on wildlife loss. You know, these are statistics that we see all the time. We see, you know, we've lost 90% of our wildflower meadows. We've lost 90% of our wetlands and watercourses. We've got species in decline. We've got species extinct. You know, we've got, you know, how can we have people in conservation say, why can't, you know, we could have golden eagle back in the Peak District. It's the perfect place for having golden eagle back in the Peak District. We can't stop shooting our birds of prey. For birds of prey to come back, we just need to stop shooting them. That's all we need to do. We don't need to do anything special to the landscape. Just stop persecuting them, and they'll come back, and they'll kind of proliferate. We've not had black grouse since, I think, 2002 was the last black grouse. Species like twite, which the Peak District was famous for, 2 breeding pairs last year from a kind of stable population. So it's kind of constantly in decline. Again, another thing you could talk about for an entire day. So Wild Peak, one of our initiatives. Back in 2018, a big meeting was held up in Hathersage with farmers and NGOs and government organisations and anybody of anything to do. Some of you might have been there. Anything to do with conservation and wildlife met and discussed what they would like to see from a Wild Peak. How could it change? And lots of people, it's a really useful meeting, and lots of people put their ideas in, and we had a facilitator, and we had a report written about it, and it was really, really promising, and everybody decided that this would be the place where we would focus the Dark Peak landscape character area, which covers lots of different counties, and this is what we would look at. And we would try and improve it for wildlife, doing lots and lots of different amazing things. So then back in about 2020, once COVID hit, I was presented with a 2-page summary and some money, and they said, make Wild Peak a project and make Wild Peak happen. So it's really to try and improve large areas of land, connected landscapes for wildlife, using a variety of different methods. And one of them, unfortunately, was a bit of a swear word to lots of people. I'll see how many people bristle when I say rewilding. Not too many, okay, that's okay. Through a kind of rewilding approach. So that is technically, how can I explain it? So using natural processes to drive landscape recovery. So wildlife leads on that recovery. Unfortunately, it's kind of misquoted quite often and defined by a lot of people, and it's been called closing the gates and leaving stuff to it. That's not really what it is. It's kind of active management, but in a much more natural way. Rather than me, like I have done for 17 years, go out with a group of volunteers, brush cutting and chopping trees down and that kind of thing, how can wildlife do that job instead? How can natural processes drive that active management of the landscape? So it started like this, but unfortunately, when I tried to, this is another one of those hour-long things, when I tried to engage all of the partners involved in that, they said, one, some of our farmers already heard about Wild Peak, and they don't like it. They hate it. They don't like being told what to, I completely get it. Don't like being told what to do, because we have had a couple of people working in our organisation, we're completely honest about this, who've kind of tarred some people and some groups with the same brush, which is not right. You know, all grass moor managers are bad. I say, well, no, they're not. There's some of the amazing stuff that's happening on these moorlands to improve, like most of the work most of the future have done. It's amazing. You can't say that all this group of no farmers are doing anything to do with conservation. Yes, they are. They're doing amazing. Some of them are doing brilliant things for conservation. So we kind of struggle with that at the Wild. We're trying to change that round at the Wildlife Trust quite a lot now, to try and not do that, because it's not good. So we kind of went from that to bringing it into Derbyshire, and this is now our area, kind of the White Peak, urban kind of peak district within the Derbyshire boundary that we're looking at. So I realise I'm going on quite a lot. So some of the things that we've done with Wild Peak, our reserve up at Thornhill Cars, we've tried to manage that in a completely wild way. So we have a few animals on there trying to mimic a natural grazing method. We've got fewer animals on there for longer, so it's a bit like natural grazing rather than kind of farmed landscape. We've put a few it's a really well used trail, a lot of you will know it, the Thornhill Trail, so we've put some things in there, some sculptures and things that people can see as they're going through, and it's had an amazing impact on wildlife. 130 species of hoverfly just in this 35 hectares, absolutely massive, which is really, really good. It does help. We've got the county's most kind of best hoverfly identifier there, so we kind of know that there's lots there. Amazingly, kind of crane flies, daddy longlegs. It's an amazing. I didn't even know people were interested in them. It's fascinating. There's, it's one of the country's best place for those, and there's 2 red list species of crane fly there. So yeah, we've tried to do that. Access problems. People don't like the chaos. These are Shetlands, I think. Bred. They're tiny little things, tiny little fluffy things. They're super friendly, and just kind of watch you as you go past. And people don't like them. They don't like cycling past them. They don't like the mess that they make on the trail. But they do an amazing job in grazing. So we've got that kind of difficulty, kind of explaining that to people. We won't be taking them off. Tens of thousands of people there, and you get 2 loud voices saying, "We don't want the animals there. We can't live with that." So some of the things that we've done, I'll be super quick. We've got a vision for Wild Peak and what we want to do and where we want to go. We've we've advised 49 landowners over 1,400 hectares so far have signed up to be part of this scheme. We've done nature recovery network mapping across the whole area, which really looks at where is the best place if you were going to do it. Where is the best place to put things like meadow or trees or wetlands or anything like that? It doesn't mean that is where they're going to go. The way we've used it is if someone comes to us and says we want to do something for wildlife, what can we do? We'll look at this map and go, well, actually this says that you need a bit of meadow there and a bit of woodland there. So that's how we've used it. We're absolutely not going, you own that bit of land, it says you need a woodland there. Not like that at all. It's literally to advise us on what we can tell other people. We've looked at species reintroduction feasibility. Golden eagle, perfect for the Peak District. How we'll ever do that, I'm not quite sure. But you know, it's a perfect. And we've started research in nature-based economy because, as Charlotte said earlier, it's kind of the shark pool at the moment, and farmers don't trust a kind of New York hedge fund saying, you sign your farm over for 30 years to this scheme, and it's a scary world. It really is. I sympathise. It's a really, really difficult thing. Yeah, so we've been looking at that. And just kind of a couple of hurdles. Everyone hates rewilding. They just don't like the term. People is like, we won't have anything to do with it. We've had big national organisations saying we don't want to be part of Wild Peak. We want to be part of a project to improve nature across the Peak District, but we're not calling it Wild Peak. We're not calling it rewilding because we just won't. The part of it to start with was looking at, can we buy a big piece of land to show rewilding as a principle? There's nothing for sale. You know, large landowners won't sell. We've had donors come and say, I've got 10 million quid. Literally, £10 million, buy a piece of land in the Peak District. It doesn't exist. It's not available for sale. Land prices are absolutely insane. We have tried to buy pieces of land to extend our nature reserves, and we're just always priced out of the market. Even with kind of, you take double, triple the asking price, then it just goes. There have been very strategic pieces of land right next to our reserves or somewhere important, not just random bits for buying it for the sake of it. Some people are already doing it. You know, go to the Roaches. Staffordshire Wildlife Trust are doing amazing things up there. And yeah, other wildlife trusts. I won't talk about them. You know, just a few things that you know we could reintroduce. You know, black grouse. There have been some attempts before, but you know it's really tricky if we don't get the habitat right. It's perfect because of the niche that it requires and woodland edges and that kind of thing. It's just a really great opportunity for improving habitats across the landscape. And you know, turtle doves, goshawk, pine marten. You know, when you do we did a feasibility study on pine marten and found that we wouldn't get any pine martens to reintroduce for about 50 years because we're way down the list in Derbyshire because our habitat's so poor, it would just never work. But yeah, the smaller stuff as well, butterflies, and you know, can we have scenes like this that you get in Scotland? They never have flooding problems because that's their river basin. You know, when they get a flood, it can just spread. It's brilliant. We struggle with that because of the A6 and things like that. You know, and the Lake District, just really, really beautiful. And just a couple of things to finish off on. Really, some of you may have been to NEP. It's the one that everybody talks about. This is really related to linking this all to access. And NEP, one of the most famous rewilding projects, and they've got this huge bit of land, 3,000 odd hectares that part of it that they rewild. They're super honest when you go and speak to them about it because they explain all about their finances and how they're able to do it. And you know, they get thousands and thousands of visitors from kind of staying and doing their glamping, and they made 80 grand on a guide to show you purple emperor butterflies. You buy this guide for a tenner and it takes you in a map. In 1 year they made 80 grand from it. You know, ecotourism. It can really pay. We don't need more people to the Peak District, as you know. We just need them to stay longer and do more things and kind of get out there and look at stuff. But you know, their profit margin last year was 22%, 190 grand pure profit from those things. So there's other things that we can do. White-tailed eagles on Mull. worth £2.1 million of local income every year from one charismatic species. One species. Imagine in the Peak District if we were able to reintroduce golden eagle. You don't have to go to the north of Scotland to see them. You can see them. 14 million people that come here every year can come and see golden eagle in our national park. What impact on the local economy? What impact on our farmers supplying food for those people and places for them to stay? I don't want any more Airbnbs in Bakewell, though. God, blimey. Pine Martins in Scotland. People paying, 50 quid for a couple of hours to go and see Pine Martins. And it's more things for people to do when they're coming, and coming for different reasons, not getting more people. It's coming for different reasons and kind of more reasons for people to come. There's loads and loads of different things. And this really is finally, because this is our species reintroduction project. I hope you don't mind me taking slightly longer because Craig's not here. Is that okay? So in Willington, in the south of Derbyshire, we, a couple of years ago, reintroduced beaver, and it has had an amazing impact. It's rubbish for access, because at the moment they're all caged in, but hopefully wild release of beaver is on the horizon. And this is November 2022, where we've just got this dense kind of willow-dominated reed bed, to February 2023, and you can see where the beaver have already started damming things up and creating rivers and backwaters, and the impact for that on wildlife is incredible. Log onto our website just to look at this, and they've done some really, really detailed. We've got some brilliant people taking photographs and films and things like that. We can't do enough beaver experience trips. We literally can't provide enough for people willing to pay loads of money to try and see our beaver here. Imagine this in the Peak District. If any of you, we've got some money to do another feasibility study. If any of you knows of anyone else, I've been to speak to Craig actually, to do a beaver feasibility reintroduction project within the Peak District. We have the money to be able to do that, and then potentially the money to have them reintroduced. The impact has been incredible on the habitat and for people coming. It's been really, really great. I'll stop talking. Thank you. Hope that was okay. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah, questions. Paul?
Hello.
Brilliant presentation. Absolutely loved every bit of that. One of the questions I would ask is the areas where you've been able to be effective. Have you noticed any attenuation on flooding by the reintroduction of vegetation and wildlife?
It's not yet. It's still quite early days, and it's really difficult to quantify. So some of the bits that we've done around the Hogshaw. The other thing that's difficult to do is persuade landowners to do anything significant at the moment. So an example is Hogshaw. We did a project to look at any natural interventions that we could have that included blocking channels or tree planting or anything like that. Of 21 potential interventions, we only managed to do 3 of them because of, landowners at the moment don't know what scheme to go into and what they can get paid for. At the moment, there's no payment for these services. There may be through the New Elm scheme, but where you can get payment for improving your hedgerows and things like that, for actual physical attenuation, there's no financial benefit for landowners. It's bonkers. How much damage, how many tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds are these floods causing? Bit of investment from insurance companies into these schemes. So so the ones that we've done haven't yet been big enough and it's difficult to measure. Sorry, that's not a great answer.
No, it's the answer.
Thank you.
Ben?
Just a quick point from me. Look, awesome passion. I feel your frustration. You can see the opportunity. You know where you want to get to. You don't control the game board, and so you're very limited in what you're able to do to get you to that end point. So I feel it. One of your nature reserves got my family through COVID. I live next to Nutwood Nature Reserve in Darley Abbey,
Oh, cool.
and we virtually went there every single day.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome place. It's only a small point, but you talked about cows and how
Yeah.
a lot of people object. So I run the local Beaver Scouts, and so I used to take my kids there every day, and you put Highland cattle on there, and we got to know the cows and understood why they were there. But you know, the signs say danger cows or be aware cows.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it says.
Yeah.
Most of the Beaver Scouts, when we did nature walks around there, terrified. Didn't understand. They didn't understand why the cows were there.
Yeah.
All it costs is a laminator, a piece of A4, and somebody to put a sign on the gate to say, here are our cows, they're here to do a job, and make it friendly. Stick it on the gate. It's only there for 2 or 3 months. Help the children of the village, wherever it is, or the people, understand why those cows are there, that they are not approachable, but they're there for a reason. Don't make it so that, caution, cows, beware cows. I understand there's a health and safety thing there, but let's try and educate people of why they're there, and it costs pennies.
That's really helpful, Ben. Thank you very much. Yeah, I get that. The difficulty for us there is it's not our site. We graze it, but it's owned by the council, and they're a little bit more not that way inclined. But thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about education around some of these things, because there is a general change in the Peak District, especially with people who are managing land for wildlife, more towards cows from sheep. And I think there's a lot of nervousness around the people around them, and actually general education of why they're there, what they're doing, as well as being cautious. I think, I mean, I'm terrible around cows. I've got much better.
The Highlands are a funny one because they have
really
the fringe
aggressive.
in their eyes, and they hear a noise and they kind of flick the fringe out. People think they're displaying, like, no, they're just getting the hair out of their eyes.
And they just look really scary.
They do, don't they?
So all they really want to do is sit and eat.
That's why the Shetlands are so good, because they're small and fluffy, and no horns, and do a brilliant hard grazing job, more importantly.
Any other questions or comments for Charlotte? Excellent.
I've got Dexter's, so yes, you know, a similar small, fluffy, brilliant they are, and wonderful habitats that they create. We've outwintered quite a lot, and the improvement in the tussocks of the grassland and the many more insects. I'm a great passionate about insects, because they're the ones at the bottom of the chain, and you're not going to get anything at the top of the chain unless you've got those ones there. I've noticed over the years there's a massive decline in the insect population, and I think a lot of that is to do with environmental pollution, because if we're all getting asthmatic, goodness knows what it's doing to a small insect. I'm interested in your wildflower meadows. I'm in a higher level stewardship scheme, and that's for my hay meadows, so I'm busy doing that. My question to you is, with access by people on rights of way, what impact do you think that has on wildlife? I'm speaking personally about dogs. I've got a lot of footpaths across my land. I'm very much on the edge of the village, and I have a massive problem with my livestock, with worrying by dogs, and I hate to think what it's doing to the wildlife. We're doing our best to create habitats that are going to bring the wildlife into the area, but we do see a lot of trouble with dogs, and I just wondered if you have a view on that. I know it's controversial, and I know that personally, I think dogs should be on leads. And I think we'll see a lot more wildlife coming back if they are. I mean, it was one of the best things about Foot and Mouth was that people were banned, and all sorts of wildlife put its head up above the surface, and you could see it. So, thank you.
Can I give a politician's opinion? I think without people experiencing wildlife and without people coming across it, they're never going to learn to love it. So we've got to get people out into the countryside and give them these experiences, and hopefully that will lead to them having a love for it. But there is an issue with education, and people, kind of like when I was a lad, it was all about the country code on TV and what you should do. We don't get any of that anymore. There's no education for people unless you're lucky enough to be from a school with forest schools that take kids out and things like that. So we need that education element so that people understand that, because it's always, well, not my dog, isn't it, as well? You know, I'm a dog owner too, and from now onwards I'll be keeping them on a lead until the end of the super important seasons. But it's a bit of a challenge. It's really important to get people out there, but we need to give them the right tools to be able to know how to behave in that landscape, I think.
Thank you. Andrew.
Dave, thank you for your presentation. I suspect that if there were some Dark Peak farmers or landowners in this room, you wouldn't have such a warm reception.
No.
Really wouldn't. Because the farmers and the landowners that I speak to, White Peak farmers would say, well, what about food security? This is in the headlines, all the pressure we're under to increase yields and food production. And Dark Peak landowners might say, regardless of how they manage the land, you know, most of it's access land, has got public right of access. How do you equate 16 million visitors with rewilding and, you know, letting everything go? So it's a real challenge, a really tricky one. But I guess my question to you is, you've said nothing about nature recovery networks and the nature recovery strategies that the government have got every local authority, including this one, to work up, including nature recovery mapping and setting a strategy to doing our bit. How does it fit in there? Because that's got to be part of it, surely. Nature on your doorstep, as well as the big stuff that you're talking about.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'm obviously coming at this from a nature conservation point of view, and the facts are there. You know, I'm not making this stuff up. It just comes from scientific fact that our landscape for wildlife is in the state that it's in, and we need to improve it. In terms of nature recovery networks, that is what Wild Peak is all about. And that is why we started with those elements of creating a vision and then doing the mapping and looking at where would be the best place to do bits. I work really closely with Sarah and that team on developing I can't remember what we decided to call it, the vision for the whole of the Peak District for One Peak. That's that. Thank you. Yes. So we work really closely with that group of organisations to do that. And this will underpin nature recovery networks and bigger, better, more and joined up. So that is the whole aim of this. As you were saying, Ben, with access in elms, there are some amazing opportunities potentially for elms to impact nature recovery networks. And the offer's got to be right. It's got to work for landowners, and it's got to be kind of followed up in the right way to make sure landowners are doing what they say they're going to do. It's kind of it's all interlinked, and this is part of the nature recovery network strategy.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, in the Peak District, as you know well, that 95% of the national park is in private hands. So our ability to directly influence is limited. And until there's a political will, that won't change especially in terms of the Dark Peak. And I agree with what Ben said earlier. There's little prospect that that's going to change at the moment. We've struggled as a National Park Authority to make even small changes, such as trying to ban burning on Deep Peat, for instance, let alone some other management practices that are unfavourable to nature. There's just not that political imperative at the moment, and until there is, there's not going to be too much change.
Which is why it's even more important that we continue to campaign for change, isn't it? And we need to keep pushing. It's a shame Craig wasn't here, because is it 13% of the Peak District that the National Trust owns? 13%. If a landowner like that, some of the work that the National Trust are about to embark on is game changing potentially. And working with their tenants to manage their farms in a completely different way in the Dark Peak is potentially game-changing. If they are able to deliver what they hope to deliver, then that is going to have such a huge impact on that Dark Peak landscape. and potentially influence other landowners around. That, you know, we've just got to campaign more. We've just got to be louder and encourage people and give them the right incentives and tools to take that forward, and, you know, campaign to government. We're doing a lot nationally on campaigning to government for change, but we still need to. I understand your frustration as well, clearly, but yeah, we've just got to keep doing it. We've just got to keep chipping away.
And just finally for me, because I don't want to come in too much, I think as long as we're clear that you represent a campaigning organisation, a political organisation in many ways, then the National Park Authority and Derbyshire County Council are not. So we've got to keep that balancing act, trying to work with landowners and the farming community on their kind of day-to-day needs, but at the same time trying to influence a more kind of nature-friendly approach and a more climate-friendly approach, which isn't easy when you've got such political tensions. And the abuse that I get, and I'm sure Sue's got occasionally from political activists who are trying to bang the table and get political change, is a very difficult one for the National Park Authority sometimes to keep that balance, but we have to. So we're sympathetic very much to what you're trying to do in the nature recovery scheme, but it's if it was only that simple.
I hope I wasn't suggesting it was simple. I hope my presentation suggested it's tough. It's a really difficult landscape, and it's an uphill struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions, or sort of? You can go and sit down if you like. So no, you don't necessarily. It's a group discussion, not all just questions to you as well. Thank you. Sorry, Claire, and then Susan.
So mine's just a small one, really. Thanks very much, Dave. You kind of took us on a bit of an emotional roller coaster there, didn't you, with the kind of the sort of horrific stats, and then the the kind of awesome list of kind of aims and ambitions, with the sort of change in attitude or policy to to how we get food, and the sort of rewilding and reintroducing species. I guess there's just such a lot there, isn't it? So I guess what I want to know is, which ones do you think concretely, we're going to be able to achieve that, and which ones are more either long term or, I guess, aspirational?
I think. Are you talking species?
Can you press your button, Dave? Thank you.
You're talking, yeah. If you're talking species, I think I'm not sure we're going to get golden eagle in my lifetime, but if we can, we try to be aspirational so that we can then have a compromise type of approach. So if we aim for golden eagle and we manage to keep goshawk and hen harrier and improve things for merlin, I'm just talking birds of prey at the moment, then fantastic. That's a really good positive thing. I think it'll be tricky to achieve 33% of the Peak District improved for wildlife by 2030. I think that is going to be an absolutely massive challenge. But if we can go some way to achieving that and improve the landscape and that connectivity in the nature recovery network, then we'll have done an effective job, I think. Nice. So black grass would be amazing. Oh. Birds again.
Thank you. Susan, do you want to turn your microphone off, Dave?
I will do, thank you. Dave, really interesting presentation, really fascinating, but I just want to echo what Andrew said about, that we do have these sort of conflicts, but very interesting, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to hope that that's not the beginning of a conversation, but I guess another milestone in that longer conversation, because I'm very interested in the fact that that's it's a key context of how we're thinking about the future of the park, and obviously the future of access. And I guess if I can speak as a recreational group representative rather than chair for a moment, if that's okay, I think those of you who remember Henry Focard are probably going to hear his words. They are mine, but I talk to him so much. It's going to, but that actually recreational users can be part of the solution and not necessarily part of the problem on some of this. And so we're I guess as the BMC, very interested in the role that climbers and other recreational users can play in working with organisations like the Wildlife Trust and with the National Park and others to look at where there are conflicts between recreational users and access and nature, but also where there are benefits. And the Ring Ousel project is the obvious one, where hopefully the actions of climbers have meant we've got a better and more stable population at Stanage and Eastern Moors than in other parts of the country. I was really struck a bit in your presentation where you were talking about reintroducing beaver, which is amazing, and clearly for nature and retaining water in the landscape is really good. But I looked at that and thought, well, if there was a footpath through there, how are you going to, a bit like where they've done gully blocking on Kinder, where it's great for nature, it's great for the landscape, but from an access perspective, suddenly you've got an issue you didn't have before. And the National Trust worked with Ramblers and others around different kinds of gully blocking so that you could walk across. So I'd be really interested in looking at where you're doing that kind of work that in some ways impedes access, how you will work in the future with organisations like the Ramblers, the BMC, paddlers and others to protect and preserve and enhance access, even where you're changing the landscape to perhaps be less amenable to that.
I can partly answer that. That's part of our feasibility study as well, and engaging with stakeholders and user groups. So that would be all part of that before we did it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other final questions? Final from you, Jez.
Yes, just to see what's your view on. So take Reading and red kites. There's a huge population there now, 90% fed by humans. Obviously, if you haven't got enough space, how far should or could we go with essentially artificially supporting certain types of habitats, certain types of certain species, before it becomes so unnatural that it's a bad thing to do?
Wow. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I guess we wouldn't agree with artificially supporting species like red kite. Our approach to that would be natural reintroduction and naturally supporting that species. So, I keep going back to black grouse. The reason why we lost it and why reintroductions have failed is because the natural requirements were not sustainable, and unless we had that, we wouldn't embark on a reintroduction program, and we wouldn't support artificial feeding of species. Oh yes, yeah. I mean, it's not the whole point is landscape recovery and nature recovery networks and kind of sustainable populations. And we don't want uncontrolled birds of prey across the Peak District. We want a natural, healthy population of everything, and which is what rewilding is about. It's about natural, healthy populations of wildlife across the species and habitats. So,
yeah, it's just there's a rebooting problem, I suspect. It's like starting a car. You have an electric motor to start another engine. Maybe there's compromise needed at times. I don't know. It's just a question.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, that was a really great discussion. Thank you, Dave, for that. And Craig has offered to talk to us in the future about their programmes, which I think could be really interesting. And I think there's questions around farming and their relationship with tenant farmers in particular around that could be quite interesting as well. So, yeah, thank you. So a change of tack for our next item. I think Sue up next. Is that still? Yeah, Sue. So Sue's got two items. The first is updating us on the Access for All, and the second is the proposed Crow Act restriction on Silence Mine. That's right.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Right, the first item actually isn't a change in tack, because the announcement that was made at the end of January by DEFRA relating to the Environmental Improvement Plan is about access to nature, the headline of 15 minutes that we've heard about, but also linked in with that was the fact that an amount of millions had been awarded to national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty under DEFRA's Access for All funding. back at the December meeting, we'd actually received the funding, but we couldn't say anything about where the money had come from for the work that we were doing. So in December, you had a presentation from me talking about everything that the National Park does and everything that is done within the National Park about improving access. So this is the rest of that story, to say that this was possible through an amount that we received in this first year of 131,000. And there's going to be a further amount anticipated for 2024-25. It's been challenging. As I said, we received the money in November. It's needed to be spent now. That's why I've been bobbing out of the meeting a little bit. So the deadline is by the end of the month for spending that. And although it's been challenging, it's also been fantastic and really amazing to be able to deliver on that and work with such inspirational and experienced people to be able to say, yes, we can do that. And we have done a lot. I have a couple of updates. So basically, I've been providing monthly updates. You will have seen the January one, hopefully, where I copied it. I've just, I'll send round copies. It's just pictures mainly, and it's just about the three main areas of funding that I've referred to in the report. And we also have the February update as well. The three main areas of funding that we've been looking at are for miles, more mobility, and more places, and more access, ultimately, and more improved access. But what it's also about is that it's about by people, for people, when we're delivering this. And we're looking at, as we've said here, the 4-month period of expenditure in this involving resting places, interpretation, videos and guides. We're looking at surfacing and widening routes. We're looking at improving the gates on routes, and that includes the authorities' trails. And we're looking at new trampers and inclusive cycles. And I've been resting my papers this morning on a big box down there, which has some new wheelchairs which have just arrived today. Now, these are all-terrain wheelchairs. We're going to have a go, not live on camera, but later after the meeting. There's been enough challenges in the last few months that I don't fancy another one. But after the meeting, we'll open it up, and you can be the first to see these new wheelchairs. But they will be at Cycle Hard visitor centres, some of our accessibility hubs, because we provide wheelchairs free of charge for people to borrow. We know that it helps them to just move around, and these all-terrain ones are there for people to just pop into one of our centres and to borrow. Of course, we do end up with people offering donations as well for the wheelchairs, and that's nice. So if you can afford to give a donation, that's lovely. If not, then everyone's welcome. And the other thing that we've been looking, if you turn over to the February one, if you turn that page over, and we've got a little clip of a film. Oh, what do I need to do with this? Sorry, Kevin. Or I could show after. Sorry, Karen. He's gone to sleep, hasn't it? Oh, this is the third thing for me that's gone wrong this morning, so I'm afraid I've jinxed it. That one? It's fine. It's fine. Okay.
just while we wait, there's a couple of people who've been asking me about this noise outside. It does sound like there's a big demonstration taking place, doesn't it? But it's actually they're building some new houses on the old New Home Hospital ground, and it's a pile driver who's been doing this noise for 2 days now. I'm dreading what it must be like for the poor buggers that live near it. But so there's a huge pile driver just knocking posts in the ground. So yeah, just in case you're worried what's happening outside.
No. Fine. Yeah, I'm going to show you that after. It's just, you'll see the pictures anyway on the back of the February report, because what we've chosen to do, so we've now tripled the amount of trampers that we have available for hire, which means we've put them in additional locations. But what we've done, we've branded them all with iconic images of the National Park, so people will be able to book trampers by name, whether they be booking Dovedale or Derwent or the Montsall Viaduct, because what we're going to do, we're going to take people to inspirational places, iconic views, but also where they can take a picture of themselves at those viewpoints, with those viewpoints behind, whilst in the tramper. So again, it's just something that we're doing to help provide more opportunities for people. The other thing I'd say as well is, going back to the top of that one, this last month we were very fortunate with the weather because the snow held off until the last day that we finished, but we managed to carry out surfacing works on 4 routes which will deliver more miles without Styles routes. And Andrew was speaking on Radio Sheffield about some of the work that we're doing and the funding we've received. And one of the things that we chose to do is 3 of the routes are in proximity to Sheffield. So one of the key areas of population to make it very accessible for people to come out. And what we're working on with those routes is that somebody will go on one of the routes and then think, wow, that was fantastic, where's the next one? And then find that the next one is not too far away. So it's like building up that exploration for a large population. And then if I turn around and smile at Louise now, because this has been a long time in the waiting, but the route at Long Causeway on Stanage Estate. So Stanage Forum have been involved with this, but as part of this we used our in-house team to deliver surfacing improvements on Long Causeway, and we'll shortly be uploading the new Long Causeway miles without Styles. So this will add to our overall number of miles without Styles routes. And when I've said by people, for people, it has been staggering, really, how much we've delivered, and I will look forward to telling you more because, of course, we haven't quite finished yet. We've still got the end of the month for this one, and then a year to follow. But if I could just mention the names of some of the people involved. I've mentioned our in-house team for the works, and that's Chris Cole and the Countryside Maintenance Projects teams. They've been absolutely amazing. In moving from one site to the next, and all the preparations and involved work that's needed. Huge talent and ingenuity from the team, and then also huge talent and ingenuity from Tom Marshall and the design and communications team. You will hear more about their work and be able to see some of their work as well. Helen Bauer and Sue Bezick with Cycle Hire and the Visitor Centre teams for all the support that they've been giving for the new equipment, etc. And I'd like to also mention Joe Hanney and the Learning Discovery team for Joe's work on sensory trails, which you'll also read about in the February update. They are really, really quite beautiful. It's a case of slowing people down and just using all the senses to connect with nature, again coming back and linking in with access to nature. So again, I've given the short link for that. They are available on our website. We found hidden talents in in the authority from David Higley and Andy Hurst, who, with a wonderful combination of form and function, have been working on route videos for us and trialling a system for developing this in-house and rolling it out. So again, we will look forward to getting people involved on that. And just to conclude, all of this is possible with the support we've had from legal, finance, IT, customer service team, and of course, Mike and Rich for their continuing support. Thank you.
A proper team effort. Thank you, Sue. It's very nice to have good news. Yeah. Anyone, any comments or questions for Sue on that? Claire?
It's just a small one, really. I think the trampers are like an awesome idea. I really do. I guess I just wanted to ask about, how are they managed? Do people pay a deposit, or are they trained in how to use the trampers so that they don't cause difficulty for other users of the sort that we end up discussing here? Just sort of a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, this was something that we've been discussing when we're talking about how we can roll the trampers out to other destinations. Now, I mentioned about Tom Marshall and his team. So one of the things that Tom's doing is working on an in-house tramper video, which we will be asking people to use online. Now, this is to view online before booking trampers. Booking trampers is also something new that we're developing as well. Now, the idea of the film is twofold. So the first thing is that it gives people confidence. So some people might go, trampers, what are they? Well, you'll be able to see about them on the film, and you also see how simple it is to use trampers, and that's why we've selected trampers, because they are very, very easy to use. But it's still worth talking people through in terms of confidence, and particularly for those people who might be unsure. It's a case of looking again, it's that familiarity. So when they come out, they know exactly what's going to happen at one of our cycle hire centres, going up to the desk, what the tramper's going to look like, and the support they will have in being able to use that tramper. That's just part of it. You also asked about how people hire them. We're looking to do online booking as well, and generally, I think from recollection, it's hiring for 1 hour, 2 hours, and then I think it's a full day or half a day. I'm sorry, I can't remember that last one, but the majority of hires that Cycle Hire have had in the past have just been for very short periods. But what we've been developing as part of Miles Without Styles is extending a lot of the routes, so those who want to go further can go further. And for 4 of the trampers that we've acquired, so these are the ones on the Tissington Trail, these can go faster. So what they can do is they can keep up with the speed of a cyclist. So again, inclusivity for people hiring the trampers. Mike has been asking if he can have a try on the trampers. He's asked several times now, and I don't think I replied to your last email, did I, Mike?
Thank you. Any more questions for Sue, Jeff?
Not a question so much as a comment, and a bit of a sad comment really, but in that it's very welcome to see the kind of capital funding that's being doled out like sweets to the children, but I can't help comparing it with the approach and to the kind of revenue funding that's being provided, and I mean there's a line in here that says developing facilities at key locations to improve online information. Well, that's fine for that capital, but at the same time, the authority's revenue funding is in such a state, it's thinking about closing Castleton Visitor Centre. And it's just the kind of contrast between the two, really. I find it a bit sad.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, yeah. Any other comments or thoughts for questions for Sue? Great. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, and I guess you'll update us on the rest of the work at at the next meeting. Yeah. So silence mine.
Okay, I've been here for a number of years now, presenting about a direction on access land at Silence Mine. It's been incremental, so we started off in February 2018 when evidence of instability, when we first became aware of it. The reason why we did make a direction is that the instability was substantive. And I think potentially substantive and cumulative, and potentially because of that, that's why it hasn't been resolved yet, because it's been ongoing. It's increased. As you can see from the report I've provided, how we've dealt with it in a proportional manner, but it's effectively ended up in us closing that section of access land. Closing that section of access land for a period of time in which to carry out geotechnical investigations, in order to consider appropriate remediation of the land, and latterly, because it's become more extensive, we've also talked about ensuring a suitable period of monitoring as well. So effectively, that means is that if you fill in the hole, then you monitor that area afterwards, just to see whether the instability is continuing. What I've actually proposed this time, as you will see from the report, is that I'm now proposing that we close it for a 2-year period of time. That 2-year period will give us sufficient time for works to be carried out. So we have had geotechnical investigations. We are receiving applications and updates from our minerals planning team, and some works are taking place, but more works are required. Over that period, on grounds of public safety, we're therefore proposing that the access land remains closed, and it's likely that the closures on the public footpaths will also be further extended as well. Basically, they're impassable at the moment because of voids.
But this particular direction is only for the closure of the access land. It's not for the closure of the rights of way. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. It doesn't affect any other rights. It doesn't affect the landowner's use of the land. It's just purely in our role as the relevant and access authority that we have that we have considered, having regard to the advice from our mineral planning team, that it's necessary to close the land on ground of public safety.
So as a LAF, we're a statutory consultee on this kind of closure because it refers to access land under the Crow Act. So we are asked to formally respond in terms of the proposal for 2-year closure. So in the past, they've been 1-year closures.
Yeah.
So this is slightly different in that it's a longer period of closure up to April 2025. Questions, comments, or, well, I guess first questions and clarifications from Sue. Paul.
Yeah, just a quick one. The bridleway that runs east to west along there, that was closed. Does that remain closed, and will it remain closed for the 2-year period that you're proposing?
The Derbyshire County Council, as the Highways Authority, will have responsibility for that. So I can't speak for them and say that the closure will be for the same period. But we work very closely with Derbyshire County Council on this, and also the roads team, the highways team as well, because the road above it is also closed as well due to instability.
sorry, just to come back on that very quickly, because if the road is closed and the bridleway is closed, then access routes going east to west on that part of the hill are all closed, aren't they? There's no way other than going down into Fulo and round and back up. So it creates an issue in terms of connecting various places up both. I mean, this probably should be fired over that way rather than to you, but.
I think I'll just add in terms of that is that the road has been closed previously, and then as a priority, works were carried out to make it safe, and it was reopened. I don't know the assessment that's currently ongoing by Derbyshire County Council to allow them to reopen that, but they certainly do see roads take high priority because they provide more access. So in terms of the Highway Authority priority, then they will focus on the road. And the other thing I'll just say in that is the actual void is on the public bridleway. So the instability that's occurring on the road is slumping and settlement. But on the restricted byway, what you have there is a hole. So it's impassable.
Thank you, Paul. Martin, and then Austin.
Sue, thanks, Felice. Yeah, I think it's a restricted byway, isn't it? Not a bridleway, the east to west route. I didn't know the road had been closed, so I've seen it previously closed, so that was an interesting update. But I think I was there several months ago, and I could see there were signs in the road starting to cracks appear. Just do you know what the section of the road is closed? Because there's 2 footpaths. I'm just looking at access. There's I forget what the names are, but there's one which comes directly towards the closed footpath or access land. If we use that one, is that bit of road closed or open?
I'd need to check on the latest. I'm sorry, I didn't. I wasn't able to go and check what the latest section of closure was just before the meeting. Last time I was out, it was a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So, and just for clarity, obviously we're not, in this particular case, we're only talking about the Crow access land closure, not the rights of way or the road closure. Obviously we can ask Derbyshire County Council to feed back to us on that separately. But I think the point about the impact of the rights of way closures and the road closure on east-west access is it's a good one, but probably not one that we would necessarily include in the response to this particular consultation. As Austin, and then I'll come to Susan.
Really, probably following on from Martin's comment, from observation, the road's open to all other users other than car or vehicle users. But the closure for 2 years on the access land, what's the likelihood of the access land opening after the 2 years? Is there an estimate on that?
I would say at this current time, I have serious reservations as to whether we will be able to reopen that access land. There is certainly part of that access land that provides really good connectivity with the public rights of way in the area. So when we first started looking at this and dealing with the voids that were apparent, we were dealing with it as a way of identifying routes that people could safely use. So steering them away from areas that might be subject or might be at risk of instability, or where overgrowth was so dense that you couldn't monitor stability easily, and keeping them to defined routes. Part of the access land is a very steep hillside with a lot of brambles on. It's not easy to access, and I think that probably leads us back to what we were saying earlier on in the meeting about when we talk about access, it's ensuring that there is access on access land. So, but to have a loss of access land is very unfortunate, and we're doing whatever we can to try and keep some form of access. The 2-year period and the fact it's increased from 1 year to 2 years is being realistic and allowing for monitoring. It's not making a judgment at this stage that it won't reopen. But you've asked, and I will be very honest with you in saying, because of the period of time that this has been going on, then I'm not sure that we will be able to keep open all that area of access land. But what we could look at doing is considering promoted routes across that access land, or identified routes across that access land.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, don't worry.
Thanks for the open and honest answer.
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
Yeah, it was just from a Derbyshire County Council point of view. I know we're not talking about the road, we're just talking about that access. But I'm probably sure you're aware we've got several of these sort of like road closures in our area. There are no quick fixes, and they do need to be monitored over quite a substantial period of time. But if members do want me to go back to get a specific answer about that, I can try and find out where we are.
That would be great, Susan. Thank you, if you're willing to do that. Any other questions or comments? Or so from my perspective, I can just say that so I did. Some of you will know, as Henry again, Henry Folkart, who used to be on the LAF, is one of the trustees of the Silence Mine Heritage kind of group, which manages the site. And I did speak to him before the meeting just to get their perspective, to make sure that there wasn't anything, basically to ask if there's anything they would want me to raise with you. And actually from their perspective, I think they are in general supportive. I have to emphasise I'm not speaking for them, but my understanding is that they are generally supportive of the 2-year closure for exactly the reason that Sue has said, the recognition of the fact that even if they come up with a solution now, it's not going to take 12 months to implement. And actually there isn't currently, I'm not aware that there is an effective remediation solution. Martin and I have both seen the site, and it's frankly terrifying. And as far as I understand it, it's got worse since we were there. The amount of landslipping and continuing active landslipping is quite significant. So from my perspective, just from a public safety perspective, it doesn't seem appropriate to keep it open. But Paul?
Just slightly controversial question. Dare we ask the question of cause and effect? There was... Has that been discussed or investigated?
The geotechnical assessment was looking to see what the nature of the instability was, and therefore what remediation would best work. There is no conclusion on that as yet.
Thank you, Sue. So, as in terms of the people in the room, are we all happy for the LAF to respond to the consultation, basically agreeing to the proposal, I guess with the same provisos as Sue has put in, as I think are in a restriction, which is essentially if the work is completed and it is deemed to be safe earlier, then we'd want it reopened at the earliest convenience, but understanding that, recognising that actually we understand it's a complex issue. And I think it's worth us mentioning the rights of way and the road closure in the letter, even though we know it's not specifically relevant to this particular closure, because I think that it is a concern. I think it's well made that it does, with both closed, it does rule out that. Is that everybody happy with that? Okay. I will work with you guys to put that letter together.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. Okay. Jill, the ROIP.
Thank you very much. Yeah, equally, I'll try and find something about about the closures as well for the road and the footpath. So hopefully between us we can get some more information. Hopefully everyone's seen my report. I sent it out towards the end of last week. So I won't go through it blow by blow, but I'll sort of pick out some of the main things and maybe sort of include some updates that have happened since I wrote it. So if that's helpful. And then obviously if there's any questions as we go along, just shout up. So under the first aim, I've put together some information about the schemes that we've been working on. We've got ongoing investment in surface improvements. So those are mostly the routes that the LAF's been interested in. So I've tried to put together those that are finished, those that are issued and will be getting underway, and the ones that have yet to come. So I'll keep doing that each meeting, and then we've sort of got a rolling idea of what's going on. We're also continuing to do signposting across the network, so we've probably done over 1,000 this year by the time we've finished. So hopefully that will give people a good idea about where paths start. In terms of the definitive map, we are continuing to receive applications to add routes or upgrade routes, and a lot of those now are based on historic evidence. And I know some time ago, I can't remember when it was now, DEFRA actually announced an intention to repeal the 2026 cut-off date. Not to be affected by this, I think volunteers have continued to look at the history and research routes and continue to put those applications in. And I think, Charlotte, did you have an update on that announcement?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Jill. So on the 9th of March, Tim Lawton MP sent a written question to the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. It was a question in two parts. So the first part, to ask whether her department intended to implement a cut-off date of the 1st of January 2026 for registering historic rights-of-way claims with local authorities. A written response was sent by Trudy Harrison, who is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State. And the response is, the Secretary of State is keen to ensure that rights-of-way policy is delivering for users, landowners and local authorities. The 2026 cut-off date is currently under review and we will provide a further update shortly. It looks possibly that they are rethinking this and that they're going to bring the 2026 cut-off date in. I think that would be tragic for access, because I think at the moment our best way of getting more rights of way and more access is through historic research, and it is tremendous the work that people are doing on that. As you will see in Jill's report, there is a massive backlog in getting these routes onto the definitive map and therefore usable, but at least they're not going to be lost forever at some point. Maybe not in our lifetime, but at some point they will come onto the definitive map, and I can't see that there is any other way that we're going to get this permanent increase in access that we so want. The second question was, with reference to the report entitled Stepping Forward, the Stakeholder Working Group on Unrecorded Public Rights of Way report to Natural England, published in March 2010, what progress the department has made on developing a rights of way reform package? The answer to that question was, the government is committed to implementing the rights of way reform measures which will streamline processes for recording rights of way with landowners, local authorities and users, benefiting from a faster, more cost-effective, less confrontational and less bureaucratic process. We will introduce the right to apply regulations which will give landowners a statutory right to apply to have rights of way diverted or extinguished in certain circumstances, such as where paths pass through hazardous farmyards. I personally think that's quite concerning. So anyway, I just wanted to bring those matters to LAF's attention, and it's certainly something that we should be watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks very much, Charlotte. So in terms of that whole situation, we have a joint subgroup of the LAFs, the Dad LAF and this LAF, Charlotte and Martin and Richard, come along to those meetings, so that we've got a bit of background now from the staff that deal with those applications. We do actually have 2 members of staff dealing with them, so it's a very, very small team. And the LAF has been there really to support in any way it can. The subgroup isn't making the applications, the LAF aren't making the applications, although members may be involved with their own organisations in doing that. But it's really there to support, you know, is there anything that can be done to help get that information out for people, that sort of thing. But I think the main thing the LAF wants to look at the moment is, should those applications be prioritised in any way? The County Council's policy at the moment is to deal with them into strict chronological order in the interest of fairness. So the LAF is looking at that at the moment. It's we've had a meeting of the wider subgroup, which brings in experts, and we've asked for their opinions. So I think the next stage really will be to put together a letter and provide some advice to the County Council about that very matter. But what we'll do, we'll draft something and then circulate it round to forum members to see if anybody has got anything they want to add to that before it goes in. So that's where we're up to with that particular one. The next section, I've put in some detail about where we're up to with our main projects. We've got lots of feasibility work underway for the White Peak Loop at the moment, and we're expecting reports in at the end of this week. So we'll have more to report in June on all those. Also with the Pennine Bridleway, we're actively looking at a possible alternative for the proposed route under Dinting Viaduct, and starting some discussions through our estates team with Network Rail initially. What are some of the other things that we've got? We've also got quite a lot in terms of maintenance of existing key cycle network routes at the moment. We've got work starting in April on the Peak Forest Tramway between Bucksworth and Chinley. We've also got a contract underway at the moment to look at the whole of the White Peak Loop from Matlock to Roseley and really clear back the vegetation, side that route out, and hopefully create some more width there because it's got really narrow. So that's underway at the moment. So hopefully when you go there, as the weather gets better, you should see some improvements on that particular section. And we're also due to start, well, we were going to start on Monday, but because of all the bad weather, our works teams have been diverted onto gritting and ploughing. But we're due to start work on Shellcross Incline at Whaley Bridge on the 27th of March to look at putting porous paving down there and improving the drainage on that route that was washed out back in 2019. What I will do, we've got a report going to Cabinet tomorrow which sets out a lot of what we're doing in the Sustainable Travel team, our sort of work plan going forward, what activities we'll be undertaking, quite a lot of community engagement and consultation. So if I circulate that link to the report to everybody after the meeting, there's all sorts of other information in there for anyone that's interested. A couple of consultations that are underway at the moment, and Martin might want to speak a little bit more, but we've got the Safer Road Fund project for the Via Gellia, where there's also an opportunity to look at the rights of way in the vicinity of it and how people actually get across that road, what we can do to make some improvements there. And I think both LAFs are interested in making a response to that. Not got very long, it's 26th of March, isn't it, the deadline? Did you want to add anything at that point, Martin, or shall we just talk about it afterwards? I don't mind.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about it, but I think possibly might make some issues. Any comments, send them to Jill.
Yeah.
Have a look. I think the deadline is next, is 26th
26th
of March next week.
Yeah.
So I have a look at the consultation there and all the plans for the entire route, spread out along the trestle table. I have to say I was pretty impressed. I think probably thanks to you, Jill, you obviously put a huge amount of input into it, which I can see. Certainly compared to the Basel and Beckpool one, I think there's even a lot more on the ball.
Yeah, I think that's it sort of increased really, because there was also the Long Hill route, so I've just really gone through every crossing of every right of way that intersects with the road. And obviously with the Via Gellia we've got the High Peak Trail, which is the Pennine Bridleway, which is also part of the White Peak Loop, so that's quite a significant one to look at. But quite a lot of footpaths along the way, aren't there, all the way through from Newhaven into Cromford.
Yeah, is everyone aware of where the Via Gellia is? Yes, good. That's good, because I had to look it up, so I thought I would ask everyone the question. Because it crosses into the park and out again.
It does.
We thought of the suggestion was to do a joint letter between the Peak Laugh and the Dad Laugh overall, on comments around crossings and road safety and those kinds of issues. And I think Martin said you're happy to lead on that.
Yeah, I mean, probably the big concern is this is just outside the National Park. The boundary runs along the Verde areas on the north side. So we've got some in the Peak District and some in the Derbyshire. But I think it's Hopton Footpath 6 when you're crossing, going northwards across is probably one of the most lethal crossings I know of. I mean, it's almost the other one is probably if you've gone through the Parkway in Sheffield, there's a footpath across there, and it's on the par with that because it's blind on both sides. It's all right coming from the north, but it's blind on both sides, so you've got to come out at least 1.5 meters into the road to see if it's safe. And of course, by that point, it's too late. so they have got a solution, but I'm not sure. I need to probably go and have another look. So, okay.
Thanks, Martin.
And another one that's underway that, you know, I don't know if the LAF wants to respond to this or individuals want to have a look at it, is our Green Towns 20-mile-an-hour zones, where we're looking at that initiative for Buxton, obviously in this LAF's area, and Long Eaton, which the Dad LAF will probably be interested in, I'm sure. The consultation's closed now for the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, so hopefully next time we meet, I can give you some idea of the feedback that we've had on that. I think there's been responses from quite a few of the organisations represented here in the room, which is good. And yeah, some bits and pieces there about Walk Derbyshire. We were having the Derbyshire Woodland Festival again this year. And again, our, you know, sort of committed volunteers that help across the network of the trails and our countryside sites and different rights of way, which is ongoing and starting to increase slightly. I think numbers obviously plummeted during COVID, and it's been a steady recovery, but I think there are some promising signs. I've even got a new group formed in Darley Dale to have a look at keeping sections of the White Peak Loop in order. So we've been liaising with those groups as part of the work we're doing, because we don't obviously want to just go in there and blitz what they're trying to achieve in terms of encouraging wildlife. The group there is trying to do some glades in there and encourage butterflies and that sort of thing, which you know, it's all part of it, as Dave was talking about this morning, where we can do a little bit to help and people can enjoy it from our trails. So thank you very much.
That's great, Jill. Thank you. Any comments for? I'll start over here and then I'll come back to you, Martin, if that's okay. So Jeff and then Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I mean, it's great to see the surface condition and drainage work, and you know, when we did the field trip, you know, last year, I mean, it's the work that's going on is kind of very impressive, and thanks for that. And the amazing number of roadside signs as well, in terms of hundreds or over 1,000 being done. Again, that's great. The other thing I'd like to welcome is on the White Peak Loop that we're at last kind of doing something about the link through to Buxton from the kind of Blackwell end, and I really do welcome the idea of using Rudale and Wydale, because if we can pull that off, that's going to be such an attractive kind of addition to the White Peak Loop to actually go through, you know, that bit of landscape and the wildlife and vegetation and flora that people see when they're doing that. So I really hope that can be pulled off. I know it's going to be difficult because it's SSI and all the rest of it, but I really hope that can be pulled off, really. So big welcome to that. Just wondering if there's any news in terms of Roseley to Bakewell. I mean, is there any movement there at all, or?
We're expecting a feasibility and options study to come in at the end of this week.
Yeah.
We've commissioned ACOM to do, so
right.
Hopefully by next time we meet we'll have some more news on that by the time we've read through it and digested it and decide where we're going next. So
Right, I'll
yeah,
look forward to
absolutely.
hearing what Lord Edward thinks. But anyway, yeah. So generally very positive, and yeah, the Rudale will be fantastic if we can do it.
Thank you, Jeff. Nick.
Just a couple of quick ones on Pennine Bridleway. Have you made contact with Network Rail or looking to make contact with Network Rail?
sorry, we've had a meeting with our estates team and we're going to do the contact with Network Rail, which, so thanks very much to your group, because I know
Yeah,
you've been...
so that was good. If we...
Yeah, so we're going to pick up that with them.
Right, so
through
we
our
can go back
estates
and say
team.
that that's basically,
Yeah.
will come up through there. Okay,
Yeah,
and then the
yeah.
second one question was, am I right in thinking that the change of the route going under under Dinton Arches needs government approval, and has that been applied for yet? Or am I wrong?
It will do. It's the approved route that goes under Dinton Viaduct. So once we know where we'd like to take the route and we've completed all the feasibility and all our investigations, then yes, we'll need to apply to a variation order to vary the route.
Is that a long process, do you think?
I think it can be, but yeah, we'll see how we get.
Thank you. Martin.
Jill, thanks very much. Comprehensive report as ever. Just on the local cycling walking infrastructure plan, the Ramblers Area Footpath Committee teamed up with Nottinghamshire area. We put in a one-page response, and just to pick out one thing that we put in, it says on page 115 of the document, it states individuals will be put off cycling by the weakest point or gap in the infrastructure, which follows up on those things. And we've also added that walking is no different. So you can have it's just so important, and even when we're talking about green spaces, if somebody feels that they have to go down under a subway and it's intimidating, it can be 95% absolutely fantastic. That one bit will just stop them things, so it's keeping the gaps. And then just on just final one, signposting again, which I'm sure I have raised before, which is great. I mean, signposts are just popping up all the way around from Derbyshire. The new ones coming out now, you might have seen, is that they seem to have got like a galvanised post, which seems to shine a bit. And they've also got a new finger, which seems to be like a plastic composite, which is reflective, so you can see it at night. So that's really good. And talking to Rob Greaterix, the programme, as you say, it's going on. So if you put in a report by the end of this month for a signpost, so whether it's a footpath, a bridleway, restricted byway or a boat, you will likely to see that signpost in the next year. It'll go into the next funding year. And of course, the other thing is for all of this is, I'm sure for officers, sometimes always welcome reports, but of course, the more reports that go in, that then shows that the demand is there, and then of course then we can make the argument for more funding for rights of way, so it becomes a thing. So with a couple of weeks less, if you see any missing signposts, please report them to Prown and get them in, then you'll see one in the next 12 months.
Thank you for that plug, Martin. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Anyone else want to raise any comments or questions to Jill about the ROIC? Sorry, Jez. Martin, can you turn your microphone off? Thank you.
It's probably actually not the ROIC. It's something that came out in the discussion that Charlotte mentioned about being concerned about the that proposal about extinguishing and diverting paths. I mean, Network Rail are a disaster in some parts of the country for that already, on the grounds of health and safety. Extending it to farmers being able to probably essentially self-declare this is a health and safety issue and divert or close a footpath is more than concerning, it's extremely concerning. Just wondering, urgency on that in terms of getting a reply out, and I don't know, I might have missed something somewhere, but some sort of, I don't know, just describe it to us in a bit more detail so that we can be thinking about it, because that could be a big problem.
Thanks, Jez. Charlotte, do you want to respond to that at all?
I think it's basically the work of the stakeholder group, isn't it, Ben, that put I mean, there's been so many, but it was the stakeholder working group on unrecorded public rights of way. I can't remember when they sat. It was quite a while ago, and the report was issued. And I think it was just following up, because these reports can disappear into government and just never come back out again. And I think it was just asking what that was, the response was going to be, because I think everybody will agree that the rights of way network isn't suitable for present uses. It's not. There are gaps. There's lack of connectivity, and I think it was just looking generally at how the rights of way network operates. And obviously the 2026, which was part of CROW, so when that came out, 2026 was a long way away, but it's now rapidly catching up with us. But we can see what the impact is having on local authorities. And it's not, you know, Derbyshire are good. Derbyshire are doing well, but there are other local authorities where they're getting perhaps 1 or 2 decisions over a year, and they'll have had 300 and 400 applications. And it really is important that this is the way that we can see connectivity. I can't remember, it's something like 50 odd bridleway applications been put in by Flick Edmiston. And it would make such a difference to so many people, walkers, cyclists, people with limited mobility. And our roads are so busy that this is a massive barrier to people using the rights-of-way network, is because it involves a little bit along a road, or a footpath pitches you out onto the A6, and then you have a couple of 100 yards down the A6, and then you can pick up the next one. You know, we really do need to have a much more robust rights-of-way network that's going to be usable and will get vulnerable road users off our very busy roads. And I think that it's something that just seems as if it's being kicked into the long grass now, and I'm very grateful that people continue to raise this.
Is there anything more that we as the Peak LAF can do, or is it more this focusing on, I guess, do you have all the support you need from the Peak LAF in terms of putting stuff together with the DAD LAF?
I think we do. I think that seems to be, and nationally the Trails Trust keeping a very close eye on this, and that's where this information came from. Right. So I think it is being filtered out into the wider network, that people who are interested in rights of way are going to pick this up. But yes, certainly from our letter to Derbyshire County Council, I think yes, we have got the support we need for that.
Right, thank you. Thank you.
Can I just finish off on one final thing? I mean, I think the LAF is going to be very busy over the next year. Not so long ago, Active Travel England announced that they got £308 million to support active travel, to get people walking and cycling. Last couple of days, there's been an announcement that that's been cut by 200 million. So, you know, we've actually put in a bid under the tranche 4 to get some of our schemes underway now. We've got lots of feasibility going, so we want to actually start delivering some of these things on the ground. They're expensive projects, so we do need quite chunky sources of money to do that. So that was quite a disturbing thing to hear, you know, when we're all trying to, you know, get more people walking and cycling, and it does require quite substantial investment. So something to keep our eyes on as it starts to unfold, really. So
thanks, Jill. So there's something that I'd like to raise on the ROIP, which is that Rob Greatorex, who some of you might have met before, so what's his job title? Rob Greatorex, what's his job title?
Team leader for Rights of Way.
Team leader for Rights of Way. So he has offered to come to the June LAF to talk to us about that programme that Jill's been updating us on. You might remember that last year, basically for the first time, Derbyshire or Rob and his team invited members of the LAF to meet with them to go through that programme, to provide our feedback and comments on some of the proposals on some of the bigger schemes where they particularly wanted stakeholder input. I'm also aware that on some of those there have been concerns raised, I think particularly by mountain bikers, but also by some horse riders, on some of the work that's being done, some of which is only partially completed. So I think there's an extent to which some of it, Holliford Road in Castleton, for example, I think is still the work is still underway. But there have been some other routes where perhaps concerns have been raised. What I was going to suggest was that if there were people, I guess I'm thinking particularly of those who are involved representing users of footpaths and bridleways, but anybody is obviously welcome, to perhaps try to arrange a subgroup meeting and a kind of year on, 12 months on subgroup meeting with Rob and the team to look at their proposals for this year, and because there were some sites like Dirtlow Rake and Hope Cross where we talked about having a site visit because there's some complexities that it's probably particularly useful to be on the ground to look at. Perhaps talk about some of those. So basically prior to Rob coming in June, actually a kind of a subgroup meeting. So I suppose what I'm asking is, A, do people agree with that approach? And B, if you would like to be there, and then we'll try and set a date that so we can make sure we've got representatives of all the interested parties there. Any thoughts or comments on, suggestions on that? Paul and Nick, and then Nick.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Certainly in concerns that have been raised in the mountain biking community about use of materials, not so much in terms of it affecting the nature of the trail, but also mostly things like the nature of the material that's there. When it's placed in certain locations, when we went out onto the little sort of tour we did last summer, going around and looking at some of the sites that were going to be worked on, there were specific concerns raised, and Chapelgate's a good one that springs to mind, regarding clearing of drainage bars before work was done. And the drainage bars weren't cleared, the work was done, there was a huge downpour and everything disappeared into Edale, which is great, but that's my taxpayers' money that's disappearing into Edale, and much though I like them, I don't want to give them extra soil and things to play with. It's a real concern. The appropriateness of work being done in certain things and the sequencing, and also taking Holford Road as an example, one of the concerns was that limestone chippings were used, and you're kind of bordering on Dark Peak there, you're not really in a limestone area, so the appropriateness is that the right kind of material to be used on the surface. So there's, to get through that again, even though we had those conversations, works have been done, they seem to be contrary to what we discussed and what was agreed when we were out on site, to try and get some clarification about what those decisions were that made the changes and how we go forward, and how the LAF actually has a credible input into this without seeing things disappear afterwards.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Paul. Nick?
More or less the same. So,
okay.
Yes, I think it'd be a good sub-meeting, a meeting would be good, and yes, I'd like to be involved.
Great. Would you like to be involved in that as well, Paul?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes. Anyone else interested in being involved or happy to be involved? Charlotte, Martin? So I've got Nick and Paul, Charlotte and Martin, and obviously we will let everybody know when the meeting date is set, and so anybody will be willing to join that, will be welcome to join that and listen to that. But I guess rest assured that Rob will still come to the June meeting and talk to the whole LAF about the whole programme, and hopefully with some outcomes of that meeting. Thank you. Did you want to add to that, Mike?
Steve Hollingworth to that meeting?
We can do. Yes. Do you mean to the subgroup meeting?
I haven't quite got my head around the context really, other than review what's already been proposed. Is that right?
So it would be to look at work that's been done on the routes where we did put in feedback, to look at the feedback on the routes that we gave feedback on, but there hasn't yet been work on,
okay.
And also to look at possible site visits. And I guess where there are other questions on other routes that maybe weren't in our programme, but people have still got questions.
So it's just pulling together a list of questions for when Rob comes to the June meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything we can let Rob have beforehand, so
Yeah, so we can have a
Yeah.
chance to. Yeah, that's good.
I think it's looking ahead at the programme of work as well to see which routes they'll have to
Yes.
have a look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I think that's it for Jill's, for the ROIP. Thank you for that. Lots going on, which is good to see. So we're now on to members' updates, I think.
Well, indeed, Louise.
Which I think is only me at the moment. Taking my chair's hat off and putting my BMC back, my BMC beanie, I guess it would be, back on. Regulation uniform. I wanted to update you on some conversations that we, as the BMC, have been having with Severn Trent over proposals for possible extension of the reservoirs at Fairholmes and Derwent, Ladybower area. I don't know how many of you are aware, but as part of its Water Resources Management Plan, Severn Trent has identified a need to significantly increase the amount of water storage that it has, not just in the Peak District, but across its whole patch. And one of its proposed areas for increasing water storage is that sort of network of reservoirs, so Ladybower, Howden and Derwent reservoirs, obviously right in the middle of the Peak District. It has, the way that all of this extension is being done as part of a national programme, which is called the RAPID programme, which is a joint programme between Ofwat and the Drinking Water Inspectorate, who are the two regulators for the water industry, basically approving major capital investment works in looking nationally at our water infrastructure. And looking at water companies are then kind of putting proposals into that process to get approval for new strategic water resources. It's a gated process. If any of you are familiar with major capital investment projects, it's basically it's a gated process that happens over a number of years. And each gate is a decision-making point by RAPID, this organisation that's been set up to look at these. Gate 1 is we will give you we will give you funding to investigate this proposal further. Gate 2 is you gave us a load of options and we now narrow it down to a smaller number that then go forward to much deeper investigation and working up into their actual kind of programme, and it heads through kind of finance and planning up to actual construction of whatever is agreed to be funded. So Severn Trent are currently moving between Gate 1 and Gate 2, so they've got approval to investigate further the options for increasing water storage in that Ladybower, Derwent and Howden area. The reason that I'm raising this with the laugh is that among the options, and there are genuinely a number of options that are being explored, but among the options are two in particular that will have a significant impact on the landscape and elements of access in that particular area. One is, well, there's several that effectively are around raising the height of the existing dam walls. So that could be at any one of the individual reservoirs or a combination of several of them. And obviously raising the level of the reservoirs means flooding additional land. And the other, which is the particular reason why the British BMC sort of was talking to Severn Trent, is the potential addition of a new reservoir at behind Howden. I get the order wrong. Where the bottom of Cutgate, where Slippery Stones is, and that kind of valley. Where the dam would be, how high it would be, the amount of area that would be flooded, that is all still being investigated, and I'll emphasise it is still an option being worked up amongst a number of others. But as the British Mountaineering Council, we have written to Severn Trent and to DEFRA essentially to query the extent to which questions around access, but also nature and the value of that. It's a particularly remote and a sort of seldom visited bit of the Peak District. And in a sense, going back, I guess, to Dave's presentation, it's a particularly precious bit of the Peak District for that reason. And we were querying a number of things around the rationale in terms of the strategic need. What else could be invested in? Is this necessarily something that should go ahead? And also, we had questions around how consultation was being carried out around that. There is some consultation, but I have some concerns that perhaps at the moment, because they're still at a relatively early phase, there isn't enough work being done to engage a broader group perhaps like this, in terms of thinking not just very, very locally about it, but strategically about the value of that area to the national park and impacts in terms of access and in terms of nature. I've had conversations with Severn Trent. I talked about the LAF, and they did say they would be willing to come to talk to us, although after Gate 2. So Gate 2 is this summer, and at that point they will be optioneering down to a very small number of options, one of which could well be this additional reservoir at the back. And in a sense, just that will be very important for the LAF, because at that point we will probably be talking about not possibly choices between options, but also if this is going ahead, what would we want? Because there will need to be not just compensation, but ideally, and I think Severn Trent are very open about this, the potential of enhancing access and facilities and possibly access to water. Should that go ahead, and obviously the LAF will probably have and certainly members of the LAF will have a view on that. So all I really wanted to do was, I guess, update you on that kind of process and what the BMC has been talking about, and the fact that Severn Trent, Yorkshire Water are also involved in this, because although it's not their land, there is a pipe. Some of you might be aware of that, between the Howden Derwent Reservoir and Strines. Is it Revlin? So essentially that Sheffield gets quite a bit of its water from that Severn Trent resource. So one option is to actually cut that pipe off, but that would then mean Sheffield would need to get its water from somewhere else, which may mean Yorkshire Water building a reservoir somewhere else. So there are always knock-ons to these kinds of questions. But yes, I just wanted to update you on that. I can't really give you any more details than that, because obviously I'm not from Severn Trent, but just in case you weren't aware, it's all on the Severn Trent website, and I can circulate after the meeting links to that if anybody wants to read up a bit further. The BMC response might be online. I will double check. If it isn't, I'll ask them to put it online, and then everyone can sort of see that as well. The Campaign for National Parks and CPRE are also very engaged and involved in this, looking at it too. Any questions or comments from anyone? I know Paul had his hand up already, and then John.
Just a very quick one, which you kind of answered at the end, where if we can have resources where we can go and check this out, because there's a resident who can throw a stone from my house to there. The impact is not only the impact of what's going to happen in terms of land access, but what's going to happen to access whilst they're building it, because it's going to be a massive undertaking, a huge undertaking. I'm sure they're factoring all of this in, but it'd be nice to get a bit better understanding of how much is taken into account.
Yeah, just in terms of timescales, and again, obviously I will give you what my understanding is, but I just want to be clear that so it is this Severn Trent's project, so they may be inaccurate, but our understanding is that if it goes through a planning process, that will be 2026, 2027. Any building would then take place probably now from back in the 2030s, with around, 5, 6, 7 years of construction work probably to actually sort of complete the work as we understand it.
2033 to finish it.
Right. Do you want to? Can you?
You can actually pick up on the internet.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Most timelines have slipped so far, and they most likely will. But yes, thank you for that, John. Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to raise?
I was going to go on about planning, because that's what they were the planning of 2027.
Yeah. Austin.
Yeah, very quickly to add on to that, it's not just those reservoirs that are potentially going to be expanded. I know it's outside of the Peak Park area, Carsington. There are improvements put forward there, and also at Tittisworth. And then again, there's the interlink between all those reservoirs and how they feed each other. And the network itself, there are proposals to improve that. So we don't see it at the moment because it's buried under the surface, but if they're increasing the capacity of those pipes, presumably there's got to be some invasive works to improve those. There'll be impacts on rights of way and access. And again, over the western side of the park, there's a link between Tittisworth and United Utilities facilities in the Goyt Valley. So as well as that relationship with Yorkshire Water, there's also a relationship over the other side. And again, a very similar thing about who's supplying who with water. So the proposal at Tittisworth, which is just outside the Peak Park, is a bit further down the pipeline, the project pipeline, and that's for a 2 metre increase in the height of the reservoir wall.
Sorry, just a quick one. The 2 metre height of reservoir wall, does that mean a 2 metre height in the increase of the depth of the reservoir?
I don't know. I would assume so, but so you could. It's not going to be any more than 2 metres.
Someone would be able to spill that, wouldn't
Just to say, I mean, this is some of this has happened before, because around 2000 they've had to raise the level of the Lady Bear Dam wall, and there was a lot of planning went into that, and there was a huge concern about road movements and everything bringing stone in, and the solution was to actually reopen a quarry actually on the hillside of Lady Bear Dam, and win all the stone from there and build it from there, and it was restored really well and looks great, you know. So but yeah, the idea of raising Howden and Derwent dams is, given the grade 1 listed structures and all the rest of it, could be quite interesting really. Anyway.
Yes, I think there's a lot. I mean, in a way, I don't envy them. I don't envy them this decision-making process. It's going to be there's a lot to balance off. I think, as we understand it, one of the proposals for accessing stone, certainly for if a new reservoir was put in, is possibly to take stone locally. But again, they're doing a lot of drilling and land testing at the moment. I'm sure if Craig was here, he could tell us about it, because a lot of this is happening on National Trust land. And I know that they're engaged with talking to Severn Trent about it. So if I hear any more, I'll keep you updated at the June meeting. But yeah, we'll circulate details so people can be aware. Okay. We haven't had any other business. Annual report.
Oh, just very quickly, I tabled a draft version of the annual report. Just welcome any comments on it, really. And if you've got any photographs you'd like to put in the report, or any comments on the text, please bring it over to me ASAP before we go to publication. Thank you very much. Oh dear, I forgot to put everything on. Oh well. We'll keep that secret then, Will.
Thank you. Unless does anyone have anything else they would like to raise? Please don't make it a big thing at 12:30. But go on, Nick.
Now you've said that, that's put loads of pressure on. It's a connected rights of way thing. Is what we're finding. Glossop has started to form a kind of town team in a similar vein to Buxton's town team to look at active travel and access that isn't car use around the town. One of the things that has come to light is bus services, which rights of way is integral to the rights of way network. We're finding that High Peak, I've made some notes on it, let's get it right, around the country insert local network bus service here. It seems they won't talk to High Peak Borough Council or Stagecoach, who run services in Tameside, and we can't find, or it seems to be difficult to kind of the infrastructure to get live timetables and live screens on bus services, because they're not talking to anyone. So I guess it's, one is a question, has anybody else found this anywhere for any kind of interconnected public rights of way transport systems?
Thank you. Anyone got any input for Nick now, or between different modes of transport and transport on the access network it's a huge issue, and yeah, something we're clearly going to keep returning to. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Austin, go on.
One quick thing, a shameless plug.
Go on.
21st of April to the 1st of May, Staffordshire Moorlands Walking Festival. Peak Rangers have got an event in there. Various Ramblers groups are putting on walks. British Mountaineering Council have got a walk going on. Community-led project. Web browsers and stuff are available, aren't they?
Yeah. I believe you help organise that, don't you? That you do organise that.
I don't admit to it.
Louise, one more date from me.
Okay,
super quick. 30th of March, 11 a.m. subject to other business. There's a right to roam debate in the House of Commons, led by Caroline Lucas. So there's going to be lots of news and stuff going out through various channels. So might not be at 11 o'clock, but want to maybe watch House of Parliament TV on the 30th.
30th of
March.
30th of March.
30th of March.
At 11 a.m.
Subject to other business in the House.
Great. Thank you very much. Dare I say thank you? So, close the meeting. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, June the 14th. I think I'm right in saying?
Yes.
Yes. Here again. And just one final thing that after Paula brought this up, and I forgot to say it at the beginning of the meeting, just to thank officers for getting reports out the week before the meeting. It was incredibly helpful for me, and I know it was for Paula, so thank you. So, in general, yeah, it looks like that was very welcome. So, yeah, thank you. We know how, yeah, putting reports together is not always the easiest thing to do. So thank you for doing that on time. And if you pass that on to Sue for us as well, that would be great. Yeah, yeah, makes a real difference. Yeah. And I can look things up on maps, which is the other key thing. Okay, lunch in the garden room? Indeed.